Hello again, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this End of an Era Thursday, and here's why. The great Gregory Royal Pratt, political reporter extraordinary for the Chicago Tribune, is standing by. Intrepid investigative journalist, the guy who knows more about getting the text messages and emails of public officials in Illinois than anybody not named Mick Dumke. Actually may know even more than the great Mick Dumke, the legendary Mick Dumke. And if they are the answer to the trivia question, which two Chicago journalists were at last night's Bulls game? Yes, Gregory Royal Pratt and Mick Dumke were at the game. They were not sitting together, though. Mick Dumke was in the 300s. Gregory was in the 100s. That's what the Tribune will get you. Get to sit in those good seats. I'm sorry, Greg. The reason I call this End of an Era, let me back up a little bit. In preparation for Gregory's appearance on the show, I have discovered his Blue Sky account. And I didn't realize much about confession time. I'd never been on Blue Sky until I started following Greg's Blue Sky account. Now I realize it's open to anyone. You don't have to be a member like Twitter. And so I'm dutifully following it, and Gregory was really pumping out the skeets. I don't know what you call it, but whatever, the skeets. I'm going to call them the skeets on election night. And each one, this is what a political junkie I am, ladies and gentlemen. Each one could be a show. Each one of the and I'm just looking down this. Greg may want to have his own that he wants to talk about. Like this, I'm going to open with this one about Andrade losing to the kid, Miguel Alvelo Rivera, who was on this show, by the way. Go check that conversation out. That's the end of the era. So we'll talk about that. But I could talk about Toni Preckwinkle mopping the floor with Alderman Reilly. We may talk about that. I think I do want to talk about that. What else? I mean, these are all the Dan Proft thing. A little snarky comment from Greg. His Danny Proft thing. Oh, my Lord. That's hilarious. Han Win, we could talk about that one. This kid had a huge future. He was the state rep. He would have been the state rep for the next 10 years. And he was enticed to run in the 9th Congressional. We could talk about this. Why so many people run in the 9th Congressional? Guys, you have good jobs. Why do you want to be a congressman so bad? You give up your good jobs to run. I sound like someone's father. What are you doing, son? And there's like so many of them that Greg dropped. So I got my greatest hit favorites that I'm going to run through, Greg, and we're going to riff on them. But if there's one that I skip that you really want to talk about, you let me know. I'm going to start with this one. And so it's like you responded to something you tweeted. State Representative Andrade, who ran flagrantly untrue ads accusing his opponent, Miguel Alvelo Rivera, of supporting ICE, is down big in his reelection bid. Andrade is one of the last vestiges of the Mell political machine. I think you could take one of out of that sentence. He is the last vestige of the Mell political machine. And that's what I talk about very briefly before I bring Greg on and he can riff away. And then his Carlos Ramirez Rosa quote. So just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, Mell, and the question is Richard Mell. I know my junkie listeners out there know this, but just a few stragglers are coming in because they saw Greg's name. Richard Mell, longtime alderman, committeeman, father-in-law to Blago. There's that. His tenure in the city council began during the days of Richard J. Daley, not M. Daley, J. Daley. Before Gregory Pratt was born, there was a mayor of the city of Chicago named Richard J. Daley. And Richard Mell goes back that far. He was the guy who stood on the city council, stood on his desk at the city council in 1987 to try to get David Orr to pay attention to him and call him. It was part of a parliamentary fight in the aftermath of Harold Washington's death when the city council ultimately chose Sawyer over Evans to replace Harold Washington, the greatest mayor the city of Chicago ever had. I think Greg agrees with me on that. He was a very loyal ally to Mayor Richard M. Daley, Baby Daley, who you all know. In fact, he could have, if he wanted to, have run against Luis Gutierrez in the first congressional race for the newly created Hispanic district and might have beaten Luis Gutierrez. Mell to this day will tell you, I could have beat him. I could have beat him, even though the district was created for the sole purpose of electing an Hispanic congressperson. And I remember the Daily People said, Mell, don't run. You're not running. And then later on, he pushed his son-in-law, Blago, into a state rep race, into a congressional race, ultimately governor, and then they had a falling out. Blago went to prison. Bit by bit, Mell's machine fell apart as the area gentrified, and he moved further north from Logan Square base to an Albany Park base. Rosanna Rodriguez trounced his machine I think, is it 2 times, Greg? I think it's 2 times. You correct me if I'm wrong. And twice, yeah. And Jamie Andrade was the last of the Mohicans for Mell. The last one I could think of. He started off as a precinct captain for Richard Mell way back when. Gregory, I remember him, a young man, a precinct captain, got the gig as state rep, and was eventually defeated by, I call them my beloved lefties, the lefty forces of the Northwest side. It's like the leftiest part of the city of Chicago. They're very well organized. They're very disciplined. They get out the vote. They're on quite a run. Maybe Greg can correct me. I can't think of them losing an election lately. Not since Rosanna was victorious in 2019. I can't recall them losing an election. Anyway,
they lost a school board race.
A school board race, okay. That does count. You're right, Greg. Anyway, I kind of feel nostalgic, Greg. I'm going to bring you on. I know this is where I battled Mell all those years. You go back and read the stories. You know, at one time they did a story we called "The Best of Frenemies." The article was about me and Mell. Man, he was just a classic machine politician. Played hard, played dirty, just trash talking to your face. Thought he was invincible, was mean and nasty, and now his political machine is over. I don't know. I don't know whether to laugh or cry, Greg, at the passage of time and the changes in the city. I'm happy as a lefty for the political changes, but man, time is flying. Waits for no one. So welcome to the show and your thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, first, number one, it's great to be back with you. It's been a while. I was getting a tweet a while back when I retexted you, and somebody had asked me on Twitter, or maybe it was Blue Sky. They were like, when are you going back on Joravsky's show? I said, he's protesting him because I called him my grandpa. I called him grandpa. He said, no show for you.
It's hilarious.
So, you know, but me and my grandpa have reconciled here. So, you know, we're good. It is good to be with you. And second or third, I don't know how many points I've made, but my next point is I did not mean to interrupt your riff. But the Northwest Side Progressive Organization is one of the best vote getters in the area. And you know, they did lose the school board race last year, and I do think that's noteworthy. I think that spoke to how unpopular Mayor Johnson and the CTU were last year in the school board context. But you know, that I was curious watching Andrade's race about whether or not some of that would carry over, and whether or not the voters would you know, be duped by his lies, because he was straight up lying about Miguel being pro-ICE. And I thought it was, I think, you know, sometimes, and I'm being charitable here, I say that politicians are always on a first date. And so what that means is, right, they're projecting the very best version of themselves. They're exaggerating how often they floss. They're exaggerating how often they read books. They're exaggerating how much water they drink a day, but they're not outright lying, as you know, or they're trying not to. But you know, Andrade's attacks against this guy were pretty flagrant and pretty distasteful. You know, to compare him, to say he's pro-ICE. You know, I know it is more of a lefty area, but you know, you'd be better off potentially going after him for Mayor Johnson roots or ties than lying and saying he's pro-ICE. I don't. That's my sole commentary on the race. Is I think it's a bad idea to lie about your opponent, to straight up lie, and informed voters will punish you for it, which is something I tweeted about that Carlos Ramirez Rosa told me long ago when he was still, alderman. Is that in high information voter areas, people don't look at that and go, my God, this guy supports ICE. This guy Miguel loves ICE.
Yeah.
They're like, well, let me look into it. And then they're like, oh no, that's BS.
Yeah.
And everything falls apart once you start off of a lie.
Yeah. And it's first of all, you're trying to get it's this distinction that Greg just made, and everybody makes it: high information and low information voters. I think you and I had a whole show about this, or a good chunk of a show was about this a couple years back, about the difference between a high information vote, and you had some riff about not everybody's like you, Ben, and it was like, and you included yourself, like we're nerds, or we could tell you that the school board race, but this is an area. First of all, the voter turnout is really low. Anyway, you could talk about that. I haven't seen the final totals. I don't know how much over 30% we were in the city, if that. So it's really low anyway. The people showing up in this neck of the woods, Greg, are sophisticated voters, and they see right through this. So you're correct in the abstract, and now that's where we really want to go. In the abstract, attacking Miguel for his ties to Brandon Johnson would seem to be more effective, except that the high information voter in this area is most likely a Brandon Johnson ally. So you're damned if you do it, you're damned if you don't. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was talking to a more conservative political consultant, and they're like, well, if they tell him he likes Brandon Johnson, they might like him better. And that may or may not be true. I do think, I think Brandon Johnson right now is probably net favorable in that part of the city. But they lost the race for school board being tied to Mayor Johnson. Now that was a year ago, and a lot has changed since then, and the mayor has rebounded. So you're right that they didn't have a clear shot at this guy. Probably their best foot forward might be that, hey, Andrade has been around a long time and has helped a lot of you get garbage bins and has been really supportive and done this and this and this instead of this other nonsense. But time comes for everybody, and areas change, and that area is much more progressive and lefty now than it used to be. So it was probably a matter of time.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And then, antagonizing Rosanna all the time by running people against her probably isn't helpful.
No. So as I promote one show, as I have this show, I had your good friend Joanna Klonsky on. We did her show earlier today, a political strategist, and we were mainly talking about AIPAC and the role they played in the congressional races. And by the way, that's a great show, ladies and gentlemen. You should check it out. And she was with Jake Lewis, her sort of her partner in the Danny Biz campaign. But the point I made is that AIPAC had all these. Jake Lewis was laying out how AIPAC had like shell packs with shell donors. It was all concealed. They were trying to conceal their identity. And I just said, you know what? You should just be honest about who you are and what you represent. Let the chips fall where they may. That's my humble opinion. Of course, I never would win an election in a million years. And it's a similar theory I would apply to Andrade, piggybacking on you. Andrade has been in office for 20 years, whatever it's been. He's the ultimate service guy. You got to call him up. He'll call you back. He was obsessed with pigeon doo-doo. I don't know if you ever saw this, but he knew all about it. It's like he was hands-on. And that's what I would have pushed in something like this. Not try to out lefty the lefty, not try to bash the mayor that people in the area may go Walter Burnett on it. Say, I can work with any mayor. I'm not an ideologue. I worked with Daley. I worked with Lightfoot. I could work with this mayor. that would have made sense to me, but like I said, I'm just a podcaster. And but I do, this is what I really want to hear your thoughts on. So for the first 2 years of Brandon Johnson, it's been 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. I've just been saying he's not going to win. He's going to lose. He's a one-term mayor. I will be the only person on the north side of Chicago who votes for him. The only white person on the north side of Chicago, I should say, who votes for him. And I'm going to stick with him. Blah blah blah. That was kind of the tone and tenor. But he's going to lose. There's just no question in my mind he's going to lose. And then Greg, I'm like, after Tuesday, I looked at the election results for Chicago. This city, I don't know if it's the same city. This coming off the point you just made. I don't know if it's the same city, politically speaking, that existed a year ago. I know Mayor Johnson's a little better at playing the game of politics than he was a year ago. You could talk about that as well. But I don't know if it's the same city. I think Trump's attacks on Chicago have like fortified opposition to Chicago and lowered the tolerance to any squishy Dems. And to that point, I'll allude to another election day Gregory Pratt, blue sky, whatever they're called, tweets. I don't know what they're called. It had to do with Brandon Johnson mentor Toni Preckwinkle. And here's what you wrote. Brendan Reilly taking a big L against Toni Preckwinkle tonight. She's beating him by 30 points. And then you had a picture of the latest vote count. And I think it ultimately in the city was like 70-30. Brendan Reilly is part of the coalition of aldermen who oppose Brandon Johnson. They're like the anti-Brandon club. They fly that flag. They're proud of it. Man, 70-30. I think he thought that anti-Brandon attitude that you were just describing from a year ago would propel him to victory over Toni Preckwinkle, who is really Brandon Johnson's political mentor. And it didn't. Wow, did it not? Your thoughts on what it all means?
You're right. Trump obviously changes the political dynamic in Chicago, period. And I think there's a lot of people that sit around buying their own hype sometimes. I remember, Tom Tunney and Brian Hopkins talking about how they would have beat Lori Lightfoot in 2023. Didn't do it, didn't run. Mike Quigley. There's a lot of people that think in the abstract that they think that Skinny Sheehan, who's a legendary political operative from like the Daley years, is going to walk them around the 19 Ford and they're going to win an election. And it hasn't worked that way in a very long time. And people don't necessarily understand that. And so for Reilly, I mean, that was a pretty humiliating loss. And there's probably a lot of reasons for it. Maybe not always a clear attack on Preckwinkle, but she ran these ads with him and Trump, and they were pretty effective. I think that any association with Trump is going to be toxic throughout the city, and so he spent $5 million to lose by about 40 points. I think it was. So he's and I think that there were people last year or maybe 2 years ago who thought that Eileen O'Neill Burke winning was like some rejuvenation of Law and Order, and it's like Eileen O'Neill Burke did not run as an Anita Alvarez Law and Order type. First of all, she had restorative justice in her campaign commercials. And you and I know she's not a quote unquote progressive. She's more of a traditional prosecutor, but she wasn't out there saying lock everybody up. So the city had changed that way. And then Clayton Harris, who by all accounts is a very good and decent man, was a very lame candidate. Like she beat a guy who was not a particularly good candidate, not a particular strong candidate or campaigner. And so people draw wrong lessons all the time from their results. And so the people that and I would tell you, if I was handicapping it, I think that Mayor Johnson's a bit of an underdog going into his reelection. But the people that think that he's guaranteed to lose are imbeciles. Like he's not guaranteed to lose. He has he has a real shot at losing. He is in serious trouble. He's going to need, you know, he alienated ACIU, so he's not going to get, you know, perhaps he's missing out on some of the money that he needs. The teachers will probably still be there with plenty of money, you know, maybe not as much as he'd want, but so, you know, and he's got a good spiel about certain things. He has a argument to make. And so I just think that there's probably a lot of people who should sit down and think about what happened yesterday and reassess a little bit. But I don't know if
Do
they
you
will.
think that even happens? That's a great point. And you know, it's funny you should say. I was thinking about that. I'm like, because the tone and tenor of all the candidates who've openly talked about running against Mayor Johnson, whether they actually do or not, I don't know. But I think it's Susanna Mendoza, Maria Pappas, Mike Quigley, Gene Newlius. He's letting everybody else do the talking for him. Have all been like hammering at him at one level or another that he's too much of an ideologue, too much tied to the teachers union. They're much more pragmatic and practical. And I don't know if that, and now some of them are trying to hammer on crime. You know, it's that some the city is more dangerous with him as mayor. That's kind of the general themes, and that again, it seems like yesterday's attack on Brandon Johnson. And so, what I'm asking you, in your opinion, as a guy who watches politicians and observes their behavior, do you sense that politicians ever reassess? You know what I'm saying? In the middle, like in midstream, and change their tune, change their tactics, or do they just plow straight ahead? This is what's going to get me where I got to go, and I'm going to stay on message. I don't see any of that. Maybe I'm missing something here, but I just see like they get something in their brain, Greg, and that's it. They're going full steam. Go ahead. Your thoughts.
Well, the smart ones do. You know, when we were talking earlier about high and low information voters, you know, an example I've always liked is Anna Valencia runs for Secretary of State against Alexi Janulius a couple years ago, 4 years ago. And her campaign is talking about abortion rights. And Janulius is for abortion rights. And so, you know, he's pro-choice. So what are you saying? You know, what contrast is there? So, but you know, some pollster said that women are mad because of the Dobbs vote. So, you know, go emphasize this thing. But the people that care about choice are going to do their research and see that both of these people are pro-choice and that the office had nothing to do with choice in the separate of that. And so, you know, she got stomped on by Alexi, and she ran a pretty bad campaign. And so I think that you see people running campaigns against lefties with defund the police, which is 2020's 2020's buzzword, you know, and so like I wonder what, you know, as you're talking about, like people are going to come after Mayor Johnson about crime, and I'm not saying that he can't be criticized for a variety of different things, but candidate A says to Mayor Johnson, you've made our city less safe. And he comes back and says, actually, we have a lower crime rate than we've had in 50 years. What's candidate A going to say? Well, if you like the police a little better, it would be better than 51 years, 52 years. Like it's, I don't know where that takes you as a candidate or as a messenger in the city of Chicago. And, you know, I think that there are a lot of people that need to think that through, you know, if you, but more or less, I agree with you that Mayor Johnson is, I don't know if you agree with me that he's got an uphill battle, but I agree with you that he definitely has a chance.
Well, the easiest, I mean, so many things can change between now and election day, but if things remain mostly the same, the easiest prediction to make is this: Mendoza, Giannoulias, and Quigley, and Maria Pappas, whoever runs, will be running for the right to run against Brandon Johnson in a runoff. And then the runoff has a whole life of its own. And obviously it depends on which of those candidates emerge from the pack. And it's so far off, Greg. It's meaningless. But that's generally how I view it. That it's going to come down to that. It'll come down to a runoff. We've had the last two elections, mayoral elections, have come up down to a runoff. Chicago voters are a little slow to learn about runoffs. They're a little slow to learn about everything. It takes Chicago voters a while. I would say that low information Chicago voter is redundant. Sorry, Chicago voters. The views and opinions of Ben Joravsky do not reflect those of Gregory Pratt. He thinks you're really smart. But they do understand the concept of a runoff now. So that's my view of that one. All right, I want to move on to another. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Again, I spent about an hour with Joanna Klonsky talking about AIPAC and the role they played in the ninth and the second race and in general in politics, and Jake Lewis as well. He was my guest as well. And this is what you tweeted out or sneeded out or whatever they call it. This is pretty good. I'd love for you to riff on this. News: Chicago Treasurer Melissa Conyers-Ervin concedes defeat to LaShawn Ford. This is in the 7th Congressional. AIPAC spent a ridiculous sum of money to prop up her support as her candidacy brought together CTU, AIPAC, and Lori Lightfoot, but they couldn't overtake Danny Davis's chosen successor. I think the CTU pulled back their endorsement of her eventually, but be that as it may.
Actually, they got really mad at us for reporting that they had, and they said they had not. They were, I think they're in really, I think they're in the tough spot because I think the leadership likes Melissa a lot, although she really does not stand for a lot of their lefty values, and so I think they have a real mess there. But I think they took her off some mail, or she wasn't on a piece of mail, and people were reporting it, and then they came back and they're like, no, we didn't endorse her. It's a giant mess.
I thought they went with LaShawn eventually. Whatever. Stacy's on a leave of absence. Jackson Potter's the acting president at the moment, the acting chief. So I don't know what's going on. Okay, let's just take that out of the equation. Your thought on AIPAC in the 7th Congressional is really want to get at. Go ahead.
That's an issue. That's 7th Congressional District voters generally aren't voting based on what is about Israel one way or the other, Israel and Gaza. That's not really the makeup of that ward. Whereas like there are places where that's really important, When we were talking about Jamie Andrade earlier, I was thinking about Danny Davis, because if you drive through the 7th District, all of Davis's signs say he's someone you know. That's all they say. He beat Melissa and Keena Collins and somebody else last time. His successor beat a whole galaxy of challengers today from this week. And there is something to be said for that familiarity in politics. People do know Danny Davis and they do know LaShawn Ford, and LaShawn was able to beat him. And actually, I think LaShawn had the toughest. He got the most brutal attacks of anybody in this campaign. People were running, some of these independent expenditure committees were running ads calling him a criminal, even though he had a case against him by the feds that fell apart, more or less, and so he, for political resilience, I'm not saying I agree with him on anything or everything. He certainly deserves a shout out for political resilience. It's kind of an impressive win because they came in, they spent $5 million for Melissa Conyers-Ervin to smile into the camera, and she lost. And I wonder whether or not anybody is looking at her and saying, hey, she's vulnerable for a city treasurer.
Yeah, I would say that's obvious. But before I move there, yes, I agree with you. It was a very impressive win. And I equate Donna Miller's win in the 2nd with LaShawn Ford's win in the 7th. Very similar. Now, in this 2nd, Donna Miller was the recipient of AIPAC funding. So she was able to go on TV, and that helped her. But I also agree with you that I don't believe AIPAC was a driving issue in the second congressional. I don't believe. No, in the second where Donna Miller won. In other words, Robert Peters went after her hard for taking the APAC money, and every lefty I know in the city of Chicago knew she took uh, uh, the APAC money. And I'm a bit biased here. I have to confess my bias, Greg. I'm very open about this. Her communication specialist, Delmarie Cobb, is an old friend of mine, and I have a lot of respect for Delmarie, and she knows the game, and so that's just who I am. I'm not going to hide from that. And she comes on the show all the time. And so I just thought it was a very good campaign, and she just kept coming at him. And your larger point, it's like in the 9th congressional, APAC is a huge issue. It's probably going to be a huge issue, let's say, in Chuy Garcia's old district, where there's a lot of Palestinian Americans living. It's going to be an issue, a big issue in Delia Ramirez's district. But I don't see it as a huge issue in black congressional districts like the 7th and the 2nd. Do you agree with me on that point?
I agree for sure. It wasn't an issue in the 7th and the 2nd. It just wasn't. And for Melissa, it was essentially just free money. With no strings attached. And same for Donna. And Donna doesn't have Melissa's baggage. And Melissa has a variety of ethics scandals that have been covered first and foremost in your Chicago Tribune. But there's so she doesn't have that baggage. And Melissa, the Urban family has been beefing with other West Side politicians for a long time. They are not go along to get along people. They have a frictional like I don't know. They've got friction with the Burnett's. They've got friction with other organizations. I think they ran somebody against Burnett's kid once, and there was a lot of drama about that. The kid won pretty easily, but people I think I quote you on this in my book about Lori Lightfoot, The City is Up for Grabs, and in other places that politics is kind of a high school cafeteria, right?
Yep, it is. By the way, I've now broadened it. Everything is a high school cafeteria. Okay, everything. Oh my God, the lefties, their inner circle, it's total high school. Total high school. Okay, it's unbelievable. Yeah, you're right. Old rivalries still exist. Grudges, it's very hard to fade. You get somebody going off the record about somebody else, and they'll just unload on you. And that's why I urge everybody, never go off the record. Just say what you want to say on a mic. Young Gregory has gotten so good at this. And when he first came on, he was scared of his shadow. But you're much more confident now, and you've learned how to talk. It's something that, whatever. I'm on a tangent within a tangent. But the point is, yes, I know exactly what you're saying, and that people, you could feel that bitterness oozing out when you have an off the record conversation as opposed to an on the mic conversation. So yeah, it builds up, and it probably worked against Conyers Irvin in this case. Anyway, shout out LaShawn Ford. You are victorious, and you're going to be the new congressman from the 7th Congressional. All right, this is another one. I'd love to hear your riff on this. I'm just going. My cheat sheet, ladies and gentlemen, is Gregory Pratt's Blue Sky page. Thank you, Gregory, for doing all the work for me. Here we go. Raja Krishnamurthy has been down all night in the Democratic race for Senate. His campaign has turned. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. This happens. If you ever been to a quote unquote election night party and things are not going good, then his campaign has turned the news off. Yes, turn the news off because it's so depressing. If you're winning, oh, everybody's pumped up. But if you're losing, oh my God. His campaign has turned the news off and replaced it with a Raja election night banner. They put a banner over the TV set? Is that for real? They didn't like, what?
It was a digital banner.
Oh, a digital banner.
It's like a screensaver. The Raja tweet that everybody liked that I tweeted. People like that one too. But Raja spent like 20 to 30 million dollars to win this race, and they had a cash bar with drinks that were $18.03 for premium beer, $12.85 for water and soda, and it was like we believe because we believe in service for the people at the Tribune and then mainstream media. We like to point out, do they have a cash bar or do they have an open bar?
Yeah.
And if like we're talking about Rosanna, right? We're talking about the 33rd Ward. They're not flush with cash. They've got a little bit of money, but they win it with people power. Roger spent $30 million almost. So like, buy your friends a drink.
So yeah, no, that was hilarious. I could have cited that one. I went with the TV banner, but I could have cited the
The TV was pretty good too.
No, that was a good one, man. Because it just resonated. I was like, oh yeah, I've been at some parties. Oh God, going back to the 80s. I was at Richard Elrod's. Oh God, I'm an old man. I was at Richard Elrod's party the night he lost to O'Grady, I think it was, for sheriff. I can't believe I remember the names. It was so depressing, Gregory. It was just, oh man, and it is wow. But I did meet a boxer, a really cool guy, and then ended up doing a story about him. But so there you go. I got something out of it. All right, let's go into the Senate race a little bit. Raja lost to Juliana Stratton. Robert Kelly ran third. So what's your take on that race? What do you think put Juliana Stratton over the top?
The governor is pretty popular in Illinois, and so she's his lieutenant governor, so she gets a bounce there. I think that I have I'm not a fan of these commercials that are just like playful and kind of dopey about like a name. I love to rip on Michael Cabanargi's TV commercial when he ran against Iris Martinez in 2020, I think it was. And he's like, it's about, he comes on and he's like, oh, my name is Michael Cabanargi. And the lady's like, what's a Cabanargi? And he's like, I'm a Cabanargi. She says, it sounds like a vegetable. And he's like, I'm not a vegetable. I'm a real boy. He doesn't actually say that piece, but he's like, I'm not a vegetable. I'm a man. And and it's 30 seconds of a dude talking about how his name is weird. And, Cabanargi is not that weird, first of all. So, like, it is a little colorful, but, like, this is Chicago. It's not a city of Smiths, So let's, and similar, Raja's ads were all just, like, people singing his name. And, then he started trying to wrap himself in ice glory. It was pretty clear. We were talking about candidates reassessing. I mean, it was pretty clear he entered the race and he was at a certain level in the public polling. Then he spent a whole bunch of money and he more or less stayed at the same level. And you would think you'd reassess what you're doing. And then they started to try to capitalize on ice stuff. But I thought that just as a resident and as a voter, I'm like, what are these commercials? Like Raja, 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 and I just didn't think that. I think that doesn't always resonate. I thought, in 2019, 2018, 2019, Susana Mendoza ran for what felt like ever the soccer ball commercial. Like her playing soccer. And I thought that was maybe a decent ad for an intro, but it played forever.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to do something different. And so I thought that Juliana Stratton is with the governor, who's popular. I think Raja didn't necessarily run a great campaign, and his ads weren't particularly good, in my opinion. And then demographics are demographics. What is the population in Illinois that is white, black, Latino, and Indian, and it's a smaller, I think you get some of that, I think I think that, it's hard to break barriers, and I'm not saying that's right. but it's hard to become the first Indian senator from Illinois
Mm.
when we haven't even had a first Latino senator from Illinois, and so I think he ran into some of that as well, which I'm not celebrating or anything. I'm just saying I think he probably ran into some of that.
I'm going to go back and tie a couple things together here. So the last point you made about Raj's campaign was what I was talking about. Once a politician gets in a groove, it's really hard for him or her to break that, and they just keep doing the same thing. And this was, to that point, a misread of where the public is, maybe more specific, where the Democratic voter is. The voter who shows up at a primary. And I know these voters because I live among them in many ways. They are so mad at Trump. And I'm not telling you something, Greg, you don't already know. But what Trump did when he invaded Chicago, when he invaded Minneapolis, when he invaded Washington and LA is really just rubs, to put it mildly, rubs true blue Democrats the wrong way. And I believe that Raja and Brendan Reilly, just two examples that we gave tonight, did not understand that. How they could not understand that, I do not know. I guess they don't listen to the Ben Joravsky show. But it's a major oversight. And in retrospect, everything I know, hindsight is 2020. But I felt when I first saw Brendan Reilly's commercial, and it sounded like a repeat of you mentioned O'Neill Burke. It sounded like something she would have run against Clayton Harris 2 years ago, whenever that was. I go, this is tone deaf for the time. We got like Greg Pratt, which I reached out. The last time I reached out to Greg, he couldn't come on. It was the middle of he was like the Homeland Security people were ripping his, because he pointed out where the goon squad was, like somehow or other that made him a traitor, and that the fact that you had that confrontation, they picked on you, made you a hero to a lot of people, whether you wanted to be or not. I know you play it pretty straight, Greg. You're a conventional journalist, mainstream journalist. You're not looking to appeal to either side. I understand that, but that's what happened. That's where people are. And they viewed what you did as a form of resistance. And by the way, the Chicago Press Corps was their finest moment, in my humble opinion, this last year, where they stood up to Trump. And so I think Raja was out of tune with where the public was, especially his voting public. You get what I'm saying? He's been such a moderate his whole life, and I get along with everybody, that the kind of thing. That's not where the Democratic voter is right now. Right now, things could change. You know this as well as I do. But people, I think, where Brandon's definitely among Hispanic voters that I talked to, a little more love for Brandon Johnson, because he didn't beat around the bush. You know what I mean? He said it clear. I'm with my Hispanic brothers and sisters on this one, and attacking them is attacking everybody. And that will open up a few eyes, Gregory. A lot of some Hispanics like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go with the white guy. Oh, well, where were they when I needed you? You know what I'm saying? But this guy was. So that's my oration on that subject. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Go ahead.
Oh, I think you're right about the moment. People aren't looking for glad handers, and I do think Raja tried very hard to have a positive disposition, right? Like he's very, so I think you're right. I think that the Chicago Press Corps performed incredibly during Operation Midway Blitz. I was very proud of my competitors and colleagues at all the other publications, from the Sun-Times, the Block Club, to WBZ. And of course, very proud of your Chicago Tribune. And so I'm probably I can't imagine you had a ton of Chicago Tribune reporters, so I like to think of myself as a bit of a pioneer here. You are
you are the pretty much the one. I'm trying to think. I've had in the past some, but you're pretty much the guy, because you're the head of the union, so you have protections. But anyway, they all have protections thanks to the union, by the way.
Well, I try to, generally speaking, what I say is based on on the facts and the analysis and the context and the history thereof. I'm not here. I'm not particularly ideal. I am not ideological. I'm not a partisan for anybody other than the Chicago Press Corps and the city of Chicago.
Yeah, we used to when Reilly, who was really one of my favorite guests, would come on the show. It's been a while since I had him because he's just gone so mag. I can't deal with him anymore. Sorry, Reilly. Come on, come back to your senses. I'll bring you back. You probably don't even want to come back, but whatever. We used to have this game where he would say something Reilly-ish that was sort of venturing in MAGA country, and I would go, "This guy has a sense of humor, man. What you say what you will about Reilly, he's got a sense of humor." So I'd go, "Well, Reilly, I'm gonna have to agree to disagree with you on that one." And he goes, "Ben, we should have a shot game. Every time you say that, we take a shot and see how drunk we are at the game."
I think somebody would die.
Because he did and I was laughing. He said, "You're a funny guy, man. I gotta give you credit." Funny how, Ben? Funny like a clown? No, he didn't say that. Let's see if Greg knew that, but it's too in the past. He doesn't get that.
Are you kidding? Are you killing? Are you kidding, Spider? Like if
okay, Spider, that's very good. But so for you, it would be your Chicago Tribune. If I had to take a shot every time you said your Chicago Tribune, I'd be under the table right now. Okay. In fact, I'm going to have a drink of water right now every time you say it. Anyway, that was a good riff. Yes, and I just want to join in. Chicago Press Corps give you a lot of grief because you don't know what a TIF is, and I think I'm just gonna have to realize you're never gonna understand what a TIF is or how it works. But you did stand up big time to Trump, and much love to all of you for doing that. And I know it wasn't easy because Trump comes hard and they come at you. So that showed some guts, and yes, a lot of love. All right. Let's see. I'm moving on here. Roger concedes. The Associated Press calls Daniel Biss as the next Democratic nominee for U.S. Senator, succeeding Jan Schakowsky, defeating Laura Fine and Kat. Your thoughts on that race? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that 9th Congressional District race.
Considering that she's not from the district and, is so young, Abu Ghazala, I know I didn't say it right, or maybe I did, but Kat ran a pretty impressive campaign, considering those limitations thereof. She only lost by 5 points against a guy who has been around for a very long time, is very well known, and was endorsed by the allegedly popular former Congresswoman, soon-to-be former Congresswoman, Jan Schakowsky. So, it's a pretty impressive race from that perspective. I'm not one of these guys that lived and breathed that particular race. I thought like it was an interesting race, but it was Biss earned his win. It was a hard fought race, hard fought contest, and then and Kat ran a hell of a campaign too.
Yeah, I respect. See, here's my thing, man. So Kat announced when Schakowsky was still very much a candidate. And this kind of reminds me of those who dared to announce in 2019 before Rahm dropped out in the mayor's race. I got more love and respect for those people than the people who jumped aboard afterwards. And then we end up with, what was it, 19? I forget how many people ran. It was ridiculous. It was absurd. The number of people ran. So I'm like, I've thought about this. I mean, it's really hard to say one way or the other. Would Kat have defeated Jan one-on-one? That would have been, wow. What a battle. And that would have really split apart. That would have a huge wedge for Democrats on the neck of the woods. In some ways, it was easier for them, Gregory, that Jan stepped down and it was just wide open and there was no one target.
That's what people throw away their like careers, like Han Win threw away his state rep seat because there's the idea that all you need is 20% to win or 25% to win, and then you're a congressman for life, which is not 100% true, but is a pretty good idea. You know, most congressmen get to keep their seat for a very long time. You know, they're gerrymandered for partisan purposes. They raise so much money that they stick around, and then they
Yeah.
pander to their base. They can, or as they would probably put it, they try to be responsive to the needs of the community.
Hmm.
But you know, there's so that's why you get all these giant crowds of people who are like, well, who knows? You know, I just need to get lucky.
Yeah, and that was another one of your tweets or whatever those things are called. Han wins victory over Eileen Dordick, who was seemingly endorsed by everybody. It was a remarkable grassroots victory just a couple of years ago. This is for state rep. He is now going to leave public office after an ill-fated congressional run where he got 2% of the vote. Dang. Dang, man, I love my favorite part of it is the dang, because we used to say that back at Nichols Junior High in 1967. Dang.
I'm a proud user of dang. I think dang is a very effective rhetorical tool.
Dang, man. Yeah, I like Dang too. Luol Dang, I loved him as well when he played for the Bulls. So anyway, that just underscored the point. There's no reason to beat up on when. Yeah, the lure of the congressional office is so intense, and I actually feel. I mean, obviously, it's a higher profile to be a congressperson than a state rep. I understand that, Greg. On the other hand, and I don't even know if this is true. It's about to come out of my mouth. You know, sometimes I'm about to say something, Greg, and I'm like, is this actually? Do I actually believe what I'm about to say? But I believe you could do more as a state rep than you can do as a congressperson. And I actually, now that I said it, I agree with that. Definitely, if you're a lefty or what do they call themselves these days, Greg? Progressive. If you're a progressive, and in Illinois, do you agree or disagree with that?
That's a very profound philosophical discussion. You know, there's a Smiths lyric. You remember the Smiths? You know, very
No,
great
I
band from back in the day.
wow.
You know, one of their lyrics is sometimes I feel more fulfilled making Christmas cards for the mentally ill. And you know, it's about like there's you know, like if you know, you could do all sorts of things with your day, and you know, but you go buy somebody on the street a dinner, you know, um, what it, who did more for society on that particular day?
Well,
You know, it's very interesting philosophical type of question that perhaps the listeners of the Ben Joravsky show are like, are these two dudes arguing about
you know, they're not ready for it at your Chicago Tribune. Hold on, gotta take a drink. All right, here's the one I saved for the end. I can't wait to hear you riff about this. This is going to be down in the weeds because actually, the people listening to the show are junkies, so they know. I don't even have to identify the people. Here you go. Greg wrote this. I forget what time I can't see what time it was, and it doesn't matter. It was election night. Dan Proft. Just saying that makes me laugh. Dan Proft may not know how to win elections, but he does know how to get paid $25,000 a month by Teddy Dabrowski's campaign while helping him get less than 30% of the vote. Why don't you explicate that one there, Greg, for the listeners who are maybe not completely, what do you call them, high information voters, more like moderate information voters. Go ahead.
I think I have a lot more respect for your audience than you do. I think that just like I have more respect for the Chicago voter. Um, you know, Proft is a right-wing provocateur. I think he lives in Florida and he has a little conservative radio show here that he does from Florida. And he ran for governor and came in, I believe, sixth out of sixth in 2010. He gets like a bunch of rich dudes to pay him money to I think it's mostly Dick Uihlein, who is a conservative billionaire from Wisconsin, I believe. I think that's his primary benefactor. I could be wrong about that, but he gets people to give him some money. And, you know, his candidates lose. Jeannie Ives lost against Bruce Rauner and wounded him significantly, you know. probably was going to lose no matter what because he had that terrible standoff with Democrats and the state shutdown, but the state budget impasse. But Dan Proft is just one of these guys, and there's a bunch of them in politics that just stick around for a long time and they lose, but they find a way to keep getting paid ridiculous amounts of money. And Wire Points, which is an organization that Dabrowski, I don't know if he leads it or I think he does lead it. I tweeted that and Wire Points comes back and they're like, oh, he's worth it because he that's chump change and he brought back so much more money in donations than what he was paid. It's like, oh, if you say so. I mean, you got 30% of the vote, so I don't know what dissing on Darren Bailey
Oh,
as like somebody called me. They're like, oh, Proust has been, and they were just saying that he was being very disparaging about Bailey, which he probably was, but
mhm.
Bailey won that race, and Dabrowski spent money and brought in uh, this goofy, like in
Yeah,
Chicago, one of the worst things you can be called is a goofy.
yeah.
And in terms of his track record, Mr. Proft is a goofy.
All right, we'll leave it there. If you want to hear more riffing about the Republican primary for governor, check out the show I do with Dr. D. We're really going to have a field day with that one, and I'll just leave that tease. I'm going to close with something that is not from your Blue Sky account from election night, but I have no idea how you're going to answer this. Uh, Jesse Louis Jackson, his death was really hit me hard. I've said this on the mic many times. I'm a boomer. I've got at least 30 years on you. So I lived through all the great moments of Jesse Jackson's career from the time Dr. King sent him to Chicago to create Operation Breadbasket. Just strong memories of like almost every moment, just uh, different huge events in the political world that I obsessed with. I had like a very nostalgia is part of it. I have to admit, time passing, just talking about Mell, I had a moment of nostalgia. But in the case of Jesse Jackson, I really respected him a lot, and I know he had his flaws, etc., and so forth. No one is perfect. Uh, so that's my feeling, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask Greg what he thought because like I said, you were born many years after I was, and so you had a different viewpoint growing up in Chicago of Jesse Jackson. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are about Jesse Louis Jackson and what his legacy means to you as a young man, as a young journalist in Chicago.
Well, Jesse Jackson is one of the most profound civil rights leaders of our time, obviously. And you don't, I wasn't around for that, but like anytime I'm around, I was around Jesse, or even when I'm around Flager, I think about like these dudes were hanging out with Martin Luther King. These dudes have really seen some stuff, and it does not mean I agree with them on everything or anything. Like it's just these dudes are legends who have fought for a lot of things, some of which are universally thought to be good. Some of which are probably a little more controversial. President Trump was going nuts defending or praising Jesse Jackson. And I think it really speaks to how big he'd become and how much he had transcended a lot of things. And obviously, I was going to say, people don't speak ill of the dead, but obviously that's not true for Trump. But in this case, it was, and um, it was always really interesting. It was always really interesting to see somebody of that stature still around, still having a voice, still pushing for different things that he believes in, and getting respect of people as varied as Lori Lightfoot and Stacey Davis Gates. And and this is like a dumb story, but there's like a conservative media gadfly in Chicago whose name I'm not going to speak because they don't deserve it. Who was at there was a political thing and Jesse Jackson was there and he was in his wheelchair and he's been sick for a while, obviously, can't speak very well, all of this type of stuff. And this gadfly is like trying to chase Jesse Jackson Jr. not Jr. Jesse Jackson
Mhm.
to harangue him, and I was like, "The heck is wrong with you, fool?" Like he's um he's he's an old man who's just kind of hanging around. What are you trying to argue with him about politics for? Like it's just have some. This is where I'm very conservative. Is have some respect for your elders, which is why I have so much respect for you, Ben. But but you know this is
I knew that
all a
was
bit.
coming.
This is all a very winding way of saying that obviously Jesse Jackson was uh, a giant figure in American life for the last 50 years and longer,
Yeah,
and much probably more like 70 years actually, and so I was sad to see him go.
yeah. By the way, did you express those sentiments to let's just say his name is Billy Bob, to Billy Bob, the Gadfly, or did you just think those sentiments?
Oh no, I let him know what I thought. Have a little bit of decorum, have a little bit of respect for your elders.
Yeah, particularly one a legend. I remember. We'll close with this. I was doing a profile of one of our favorite mutual politicians from Chicago, Sue Sedlowski Garza, and it was a fun profile. I loved it. Big fan of Sue Sedlowski Garza. And her father was still alive, Eddie Sedlowski, who is, again, a legend in the union organizing and lefty movement. And he came into the room, and by now, he had clearly he had dementia, I think, Greg, so he wasn't completely there. And there was another person in the room, I can't remember all the details, who's disrespectful in a way. Who is this guy? Sue had left the room, so she didn't hear it. And I felt like I was like, that dude is a legend, man. Just show some bleeping respect. You know what I mean? That's a legend. That's a Chicago legend, whether you like him or not. And that's kind of what you were saying about Jesse Jackson. This man deserves some respect. Okay.
Not on the same level, but I once like cussed a dude out for making fun of old man Greg Maddox at a Cubs game. I was like, show some respect.
Oh man, Greg Radix back in the day, that curveball was unbelievable. All right.
It's like,
Uh,
again, respect your elders.
wait, time out. Aren't you a White Sox fan? You're from the
What's that
South
got?
Side.
What's that got to do with baseball? Baseball is baseball. Like just because I didn't root for the Cubs. Well, he was a visitor. He was there. I think he was with the Dodgers or the Padres, and he was
Wait,
winding down his career.
just closing this out. So, just so folks, you should. By the way, if the so you should know this about Gregory Pratt. He grew up on the South Side of Chicago. Went to a South Side high school. Knows so much about agriculture as a result of that high school education. We could talk soybeans all day, but we're going to stay away from soybeans. So your primary team in Chicago are the Cubs, not the White Sox?
Oh, my team's the White Sox, but
Oh,
but what
okay.
does that have to do with Greg Maddox as a legend of the
Well,
game?
you're okay. Now, I would say half the White Sox fans in Chicago just are incapable of showing love for any Cub, no matter how great he is. That's the illogic. That's one of the illogical things about this divide between this tribalistic divide between White Sox and Cubs. They can't even say something nice about the great Greg Maddox.
I don't think that's true. I think you're being ignorant about Sox fans. I think Sox fans are gentlemen and scholars.
Sox fans, that was not me. Okay, there's no Sox fan in his right mind who wants to be known as a gentleman and a scholar.
You're right about that.
I'm not a scholar. I'm a White Sox fan. All right, very good. Greg, it is blast. Great talking to you. Listener Frank, that's the guy who reminded me to reach out to Greg. Thank you for doing it. And you can read him in your Chicago Tribune. Hold on, sip of water. Or you can just follow him on Blue Sky, man. He's man, how many of those things do you drop a day on Blue Sky? At least a couple, huh?
Few.
Few? Okay. All right. Anyway, you can follow me either Tribune or Blue Sky or Twitter, but don't even go there, man. Nobody. Come on, guys. All right, Greg, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I also want to thank producer Chris. He does a great job. And I know that White Sox fans, Cubs fans, and Gregory Pratt agree with when I say, hey, producer Chris, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Peace and love, everybody. Go Bulls.